And thank you for joining me from your homes. Obviously, I know that pre-COVID you would often have met in person with each other, which is kind of the indication of the times, isn't it, that we're all having to be alone, which must be even harder having either currently or recently been experiencing cancer. So thank you for joining us. And I think that, you know, as Carolyn said, you know, you can interrupt by asking questions as you wish during it or afterwards. I'm going to share my screen and oh, did I
yeah, that's working. That's working.
Is it working? Okay.
Yeah, it's just taking a little while to come on. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm a clinical psychologist, so I have been developing for many years and working in heading a clinic which actually works with people with anxiety and depression. But a number of years ago, I got really interested in thinking about resilience and understanding resilience, because the kind of things that you have gone through is a really good example of where there's a really, really traumatic event. And, you know, I think it's just amazing that people do remain resilient, even if it isn't all of the time. And I just think that that's something that we can really learn and take back to thinking about how we develop treatments for people with anxiety and depression. So that was kind of where I became interested in you know, working with people who've had cancer, to be able to kind of understand more about this, you know, how you're able to be resilient at times and able to get on with life in the way that you can. So and I've been very fortunate to develop my research in collaboration with people with lived experience of cancer and living beyond cancer, and that's really vital for our research. So it's really part of that where we work together to understand. I get to understand the journey that you've been on, and then think about, from a psychological point of view, what might also be helpful for some people who are finding it more difficult and challenging. So obviously, what you will have all been experiencing in recent years is that having cancer is obviously completely life-changing for you, for your family, and for your friends. And, you know, this is a really, you know, unanticipated event that suddenly kind of foisted itself upon you. And, you know, I think that this talk is really to try and get across that there are different ways to get through this, and there's no right way, and that people will want to use different ways at different times. And how you're responding emotionally is completely okay. That is part of that really complex journey. So I suppose what we're thinking about a lot of the time today is that for some individuals it becomes very challenging emotionally, but actually that having those emotions is also a really important part of coming to terms with things as well. So both during and after your treatment for cancer, it will be emotional at different times, and that can really knock you and you know, take things out of the blue. Or it might be that you have long periods when that isn't happening. But I think it's just to understand and normalize that this is just a process that is okay, and emotions are there and are okay for people. But if people get into a distress and it keeps going and it's really interfering with their lives, what we want to be able to do is offer help and offer assistance where people can either help themselves or have other ways and means to be helped. And we want that to be really accessible, particularly in the time of COVID, where you can't go to places so easily. And we want to sort of simple and easy ways to kind of get through this and help yourself develop resilience, which is going to help manage anxiety and depression. So next slide, please. So I suppose the really, you know, I've got a roller coaster there picture, because that's what it must feel like for you on a given day, or certainly from week to week. So it's just these different emotions, and the emotions can be kind of fear, anxiety, worry, or more around the kind of sadness or guilt or anger. But there will be, hopefully for you, positive times as well. But it's that kind of going from one to another that can be really challenging as well. It's sort of the sudden changes. But just to say that having a day when you are feeling down or anxious is just really normal, and that's really understandable. And, you know, you've done an amazing job to get through what you had to get through. And, you know, you've got to congratulate yourselves on that. And the next slide, please. So some of the things that can happen when, which are more of the kind of distressing emotional reactions, are worry. So worry is a stream of negative thinking. Oh my goodness, this could happen, or that could happen, and will that happen? That stream of negative thinking, which can race away and be quite uncontrollable and difficult to stop. And that really fuels kind of anxiety, where people have physical reactions like a racing. Everybody's got different symptoms of anxiety. So quite a lot of people would have a kind of a racing heart. Some might feel hot, sweaty, difficulty concentrating, sleep problems, all of those kind of things. Actually, irritability is another one that's very common with people who are feeling anxious, and it's quite understandable because you're drained in life by the anxiety and worry. And other people, or the same people, might also experience low mood or depression, and that would be a time when you're feeling, down and depressed a lot of the time, really sad. That can lead you to kind of not find anything of interest. Nothing makes you sort of enjoy things anymore. That kind of low mood, which is really, again, a natural reaction. We have these emotions for reasons, to kind of tune us in to realizing that things aren't quite right for us. But when they get stuck in these processes, that's when it's more difficult. So so low mood and depression is also another common experience that people who are living with and beyond cancer will be experiencing. Okay, next slide, please. What I think can be a bit disconcerting, and some of you may have found this if you have finished treatment already, is that you don't really expect this to carry on afterwards. Particularly, I think everybody has been so focused on getting you through this really life-threatening illness and enabling you to kind of recover in that way, that they may not have prepared you for the time afterwards. And what's actually noted in the research by others is that almost the greatest need for that emotional and mental health support is actually the time after treatment's ended. And you might all have your own ideas about that, but I suppose some things that may well be happening is that the support from the cancer team at the hospital is no longer there. And sometimes friends and family, maybe forget about it slightly. They don't think about it as much. They don't check in as much. Or you might feel that you're wanting to sort of show them that you're okay, and so they're not realizing that you're finding things difficult. So there are different reasons why it might be a bit harder time. The other thing is that you've probably been all really busy and focused on really trying to get through the treatments, which are very, can be really, really challenging to go through in their own right. So that focus and purpose for that time, again, that's kind of gone, and you're sort of in this limbo between that ending and getting back onto the kind of the new track of your life. And I think that this is a time, and I know that Carolyn we were talking about it earlier today, about the sense of isolation that people often feel. And that isolation is likely to be even greater now when people are at home and, because of COVID. But even when you have people around, you can sometimes feel really lonely and isolated in your emotions. And I think, again, it's just realizing that is unfortunately a normal process, but so not to be kind of scared by it, but obviously it's not one that's feeling very pleasant. So we want to try and think about ways to help. So after treatment's completed, people do, as we say, often have experiences of distress, kind of loss of who you are. You're kind of the relief that it's over, but at the same time kind of concerned about the uncertainty and how you're meant to get on and back to day-to-day life. And I know a lot of people might feel fatigue as well, and how are you going to manage these things? Next slide, please. So this kind of brings to a different angle to think about resilience. And actually, you've all been resilient, haven't you? You've been resilient to that really challenging treatments that you've had to go through. You've been resilient to kind of carrying on through the whole process, even though you probably just wanted to kind of run away from it at times. So you've already shown great resilience in where you got to today. And but resilience is this ability to kind of cope and adapt when adversity, which certainly having breast cancer is, and the idea of being able to bounce back or kind of be able to refocus on life. And I suppose what's always really impressed me is the ability for people who, you know, you're somewhere and you suddenly hear someone talking about cancer and then it comes into your mind, but some people are able to then shift away from that and think about other things they need to get on with that day. But it's really understandable when people can't. And that's sort of getting stuck on the thinking around cancer when you don't want to think about it is something which can then lead to low mood and anxiety. It's not the only reason, but that certainly contributes. So resilience might be something that would be really helpful for us to bolster, to be able to help you to shift and choose when you think about the cancer, rather than having it kind of choose to come into your mind unbidden. And resilience has other benefits. It helps people thrive and flourish, but it's not a trait. We aren't kind of born with it, and it doesn't stay stable. It's something that we develop, and our past experiences can help develop that. And it's a process that alters over time. So, and also what situations you're in. So I might be quite resilient, for example, in a work situation, but not resilient in kind of dealing with my home situation and kids. And that would be just you can have different bits of your life where you're feeling more or less resilient. And that will also change over time. So there's this lots of fluctuations throughout our lifetime. Okay, and I hope this won't, yeah, okay. You can still hear me, can you?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, because I've now got rid of the pictures and I can see the bottom of the screen. The different things lead different people to be resilient, and it's very much that if you have made friends with somebody who's going through a similar treatment to you, you'll also find that there are big differences in when you're feeling more kind of resilient and when you're finding things more challenging. So just to kind of, again, be aware that that's normal and fine. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to kind of say what resilience isn't as well, because it sort of sounds like resilience is about not having emotions perhaps, but it isn't. It's about being able to have them, being able to really feel them strongly, but being able to then get on with life in between. And it's not about being quiet and not complaining. It's not about just suffering through difficult situations or being kind of strong and silent about it. These are things that people can be very non-resilient, but that they may be doing this as a way of trying to kind of, not show people how they're feeling. So resilience isn't about not asking for help. In fact, it's very resilient to be able to work out what help you need and be able to gain that. And it's not about forgetting your own needs and not communicating your needs. You need to be able to say when you need help and express your feelings. So just wanted to kind of get across the idea of this isn't what we're trying to foster, this kind of closed off emotional state. It is going to still be the roller coaster, but the duration and depth of the anxious and low times is going to be less pronounced with a greater resilience, because you can handle the waves a bit more. I hope that makes sense. Okay, next slide, please. Now, in the general population and across other populations, when they've looked at health populations as well, so in general, resilience tends to be associated with less experience of stress. So similar situations make people feel less stressed. There is less experience of anxiety and low mood. So that seems, that was kind of one of the important things that we thought that's why thinking about an intervention to promote resilience might be really helpful. And the benefits of having greater levels of resilience, so this is measured on a questionnaire that's been used many times, is quite reliable. We're able to also establish that people who are resilient have more positive emotions. They experience happiness, joy, and excitement to a greater degree. And they also tend to be more optimistic. So they kind of see the positive aspects of life a bit more. And for them themselves, they actually experience a kind of a better quality of life. Again, that's measured by sort of standardized measures, and kind of an ability to handle situations and be kind of flexible, handling emotions, being able to kind of manage your emotions in a way that kind of you still experience them, but they don't kind of become overpoweringly distressing in some way. And also being flexible, being able to think about things when you want to and not when you don't, in that way. Okay, so next slide, please. So what, in the context of breast cancer, we are, you know, you've got higher levels of need to process this enormous event and all the other events, all of the treatment on all of these other things, and managing other people in who you know's kind of expectations of you and feelings. All of that is an enormous amount to process. And so I think that what you want to do is be able to have those emotions and go through it, but as I say, not get trapped in the distress for you know, long periods of time in very, very depths of it. And we know that resilience is a kind of a key factor in promoting good mental health and protecting mental health. So that again makes sense then for us to think about this is a really good thing to bolster. And it's just understandable. Like I said in the beginning, resilience is a very, you know, different levels at different times for different people. People have levels of resilience following breast cancer are going to also vary a lot as well. So there's a lot of individual difference. Next slide, please. And so we conducted some research, and this was really in collaboration with women with lived experience of breast cancer, who helped us think about the research question, how we're going to assess it, and really develop the research program with us. So I really want to thank those women who gave their time and help for that. And then we recruited other women from NHS clinics to take part in a study. And what we found was individuals who had stopped, who had ended curative treatment within the last 2 years, they experienced less distress if they were more resilient. They felt less anxious, less low and depressed. They worried less, and they had a better quality of life. So that better quality of life all round. They really experienced life in a more positive way, which is really obviously what we would want for everybody. And that was really associated with this level of resilience rather than necessarily their kind of disease trajectory or treatments they had. It was really this tendency to be resilient that was key. So from that, we felt that this could be a really good thing to try and bolster in people who are feeling less resilient following breast cancer treatment ending. Next slide, please. So resilience, as I say, isn't a trait that we're born with. It really has to be developed and fostered. And if you're resilient in one situation, we need to think about how you can use that resilient resources that you clearly have to support you in other situations. And that can be having support from others, having social support, or ways that you manage your own emotions, or the ways that you engage with life and how you can focus back on the things that you want to in life. So one thing that the research suggests is that we want to be able to have people help them identify their own psychological strengths to build resilience in the areas of life, like kind of the aftermath of having had cancer. And I think that the strengths would be being able to know who you can ask and how you can ask for help, and actually allowing them to help you emotionally, support you. And that's a kind of a difficult thing for lots of people. They may have ideas that they shouldn't burden people. And actually, what we found is that the people who are more resilient and less anxious and depressed are able to request and accept that help. And then we have kind of the skills that people might have in dealing with emotions in other bits of their life and how they manage that, whether that's through doing exercise or seeing friends and enjoying themselves. Again, with socially distancing, that has to obviously be slightly different, but it's different skills that you found in life before, which can help you deal with emotions, might be really useful to foster here. And different ways that you have maintained your self-esteem in the past that's important to think about. Are there ways that you can do that again that can kind of help you have your sense of self-worth and self-identity aided in this time when you're going to be through this emotional roller coaster? Next slide, please. So what sort of what particular things can we think about that help foster resilience? And this is really building your social support network. So that can clearly be friends and family, and it may well be different friends from before. It might be that you've experienced is that some people who you hadn't been so close to were really great during the whole treatment and after you finish treatment, and actually being able to engage with them are going to be really just some support that's going to be really helpful. And obviously you're already involved with Keeping Abreast network, but that has great, as you all know, obviously it was previously meeting in person with people, but there are one-to-one support buddies that they have, and other ways of being able to get support from that network, and that's where people are really wanting to and give back and be able to help. So I think being able to be open to that from this organization is a really great thing to be able to do. And then I think in terms of other ideas, then it would be trying to keep things in perspective, which is really hard. And when people are feeling more anxious and down, they tend to see things in a bit of a more negative way, but actually maybe trying to think, what would you say to someone else in that situation? Because being able to get that slightly more objective perspective might give you some insights about what, being a bit kinder to yourself. And I think the other thing is that obviously there will be changes that have happened as a result of having the diagnosis and treatment, and that maybe bits of your life that you're going forward with will be a little bit different, and actually just recognizing that change is part of life and that you can get through this is going to be another thing that will be important to do. And then having a focus that's realistic, so depending on the situation you're in, having goals that you can focus on could also help give you structure and keep you focused on the sort of the present and the future in a way that could be helpful. And I think just if you, as much as possible, trying to sort of support a positive view of yourself. You've already done amazingly to get where you have, and so trying to have a kind of a hopeful outlook on life, and also be able to see the silver lining. I know that can be really difficult at times, but if you're able to do that, then that also could be really useful in fostering resilience. The next slide, please. And there are kind of more practical ways that I'm sure that you're aware of that can help you look after yourself. And obviously you've all had a complete a massive event happening within your bodies and the treatments for that. But I think that when we are feeling in the aftermath of these things, feeling more vulnerable and down and anxious, people might end up kind of eating less healthily, and actually eating healthily is going to be really helpful for your kind of well-being, your mental health, as well as your physical health. So trying to think about ways that you can kind of bring in more healthy food if you can. Now, sleep is a challenge because if you're worrying and down, it really interrupts sleep. And just having processed this really traumatic event for yourselves, you're also going to have potential sleep problems. But as much as possible, trying to go to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time each day, even at the weekends, and trying to have a bedtime routine, being really strict with yourself to not go on your phone or iPad for a couple of hours before you go to bed. I think watching TV further away in a normal traditional TV isn't as bad as the kind of screens, and maybe being able to kind of leave your screen and your phone outside of the bedroom. I know a lot of people now using their phones as a way of waking up, but I think just getting a traditional alarm clock might solve that. And if you are finding it hard to sleep, having chamomile tea and trying to maybe have a bath where you're kind of just getting yourself into a slightly more sleepy state would all be really good ways of getting sleep. And if you do wake up in the night, if you stay awake for more than 10 minutes, then sort of turn on the light and do something, read something that's not very interesting, so that you aren't trying to you aren't getting into a cycle of being really anxious about the fact you're not sleeping as much as possible. So, and then the other thing is to kind of really help yourself sort of relax. For some people that would be having a warm bath, or listening to music, or watching TV, or having a phone call with a friend and catching up. All these things that you used to enjoy, that are relaxing. So I think anything that you know that can help you relax would also be really important at the moment. Really doing some really good self-care and really looking after yourself, because you've been through such a lot. And that's, this will be for the period of, the years after the treatment as well. So it's sort of a long-term needing to look after yourself and be kind to yourself. Next slide, please. So the other thing is that people who, both during and after living beyond cancer, actually exercise is something that's really, really helpful and good to do. So next slide, please. So if you haven't been having a lot of exercise recently, and certainly, depending on the treatments, that's quite likely, then, do check with your GP and about how much you should do, and build it up gradually. But things like a non-strenuous walk to start with, doing some household chores, shopping and cycling would all be some initial light kind of exercise and physical activity you could do. And then trying to build it into your kind of patterns of your week, and working out how to do that regularly would be really good. So if you can, and obviously the weather's getting to be less so, and we don't know what's happening with lockdown again. Some of you may already be in local lockdowns already, but as much as possible, kind of being in green spaces and outside can actually also be really good for your mental health. Kind of being able to see and look at green trees or leaves and those other things, or if you're fortunate enough to live near the sea or water, those kind of things, that can also be a really nice way of both combining the physical exercise and the benefits of being in green spaces. And for some people who, it might be, if it depends on you, maybe using a physical activity app might be useful, where it kind of helps you monitor how much activity you're doing. But I think all of these things are really about you knowing yourself and what's going to work for you, and trying different things out. Next slide, please. So what I suppose I began with was saying how I was so impressed at how people can have to think about their cancer journey at one moment and then refocus onto something else. And how can you help yourself develop that ability to choose when you're thinking about the cancer? And that would be really to be kind of more focused on the here and now as much as you can, and really reconnecting with things you enjoy or used to enjoy if you're not enjoying things so much. So, again, that might involve other people or activities you do yourself, and you might have to change them slightly given if circumstances have changed. But it's being able to think, well, if I did like that before, what would be good for me now? And then there are other kind of more specific relaxation exercises. We were talking about relaxing, but actually there are specific relaxation exercises. One that is very good. There's a figure on this slide which shows a man lying down to demonstrate it. But basically, we tend to breathe with our upper chest. So that's called thoracic breathing, and that will be my hand moving up and down because I'm breathing there. Or you can breathe through more into your stomach, which is where your upper chest stays still, but your stomach goes in and out. So you can see on the slide that he's breathing in through his nose, and then his stomach is rising and out. As he exhales, his stomach goes down and he exhales. And that kind of breathing actually does really help people relax, and it also helps you worry less and feel less anxious. Now, you don't have to lie down to do it. You'll begin to learn how to do this. It's called thoracic breathing, no, diaphragmatic breathing, sorry. And that way of breathing can be really helpful to help you manage with anxiety. So it's just normal breathing. You don't have to do anything different with the length of your breath. It's just trying to do it from your, I talk about it to be doing from your tummy rather than from your chest, your upper chest. There are other forms of relaxation, such as progressive relaxation, which I'm sure will be things that you can access on the web, where people, where you're sort of talk through how to tense and relax your muscles, and then being able to relax your body a lot. And then other people find it really helpful to have an image that they can go to that's a relaxing image. So for me, it would be trip long time ago to Devon and being in a wood with a small stream and just seeing the sun coming dappling through the trees and glinting on the stream. And someone else, it might be being on a beach or being in their living room curled up with a cat. So it's something that just for you is something that you can really feel relaxed with, and kind of hold that in your mind as a way of being able to relax a bit. And then obviously there are, for people who kind of would find this something that they can build into their life, there's obviously meditation or yoga or mindfulness, which all of those things are going to be something that you would want to practice regularly, and that can be extremely helpful in terms of kind of helping people relax, and can be helpful for their mental health. And mindfulness, I'm sure you've heard about it recently. It's really paying attention to a particular way, being on the present moment in a non-judgmental way, and that's what Jon Kabat-Zinn has proposed. And so I think that there would be mindfulness courses or apps available. I think that the bottom figure there on the screen is showing a mindful, so it's full of thoughts as you're walking through the park, versus being mindful, which is then being really in the present moment and noticing the things around you, like the sun and the trees. And that's kind of what mindfulness will help you develop, but it's really all about connecting with being in the here and now, and different ways that that's going to work for you. Next slide, please. So just turning now to our work, this is kind of a different approach to trying to help resilience, and it's building on other work that we've done before. But it's basically a new online intervention to try and foster resilience, and in the same process to try and decrease low mood and worry in women who've completed treatment for breast cancer. And what it is, it's a fully online intervention. So you would log on to the platform, and it's easy to do. What you have to do is you have to get headphones and listen to short scenarios, short descriptions, and then respond to questions that come up. And kind of intervention itself is 10 half-hour sessions, and we suggest being completed over 3, maximum of 4 weeks. And it can really be done at a time that suits you. You can only do up to 1 a day, but you can then decide how you want to space those out. So this intervention is something that we're trying to do some research with now, to see how breast cancer survivors find the intervention, in order to kind of think about how we can then try and really assess, how we could offer that much more widely. So it's just a trial at this stage. It hasn't been, it's not available in the NHS yet, but this is the first part of that process of trying to evaluate it. Next slide, please. If you are interested in just finding out a bit more, then we've got a website that you could go to, and there would be some information about the study. It's being run by through my team through King's College London, and as I say, we're still looking for people to be involved in the trial to see whether we can help bolster resilience and decrease kind of anxiety and low mood and worry. And it would be that you'd have to be based in the UK, be over 18, and have finished cancer treatment in the past 2 years. In the fullness of time, we would be offering it for a longer period of time, but we just, in terms of kind of having everybody be kind of similar in where they are from treatment, with the cancer ending, unfortunately it's just the past 2 years at the moment, and who haven't currently had haven't had secondary cancer. Again, we would be hoping to open that up once we've shown it to be a useful intervention for this more specific population with breast cancer. We'd be hoping to open it up to others later on. So if you are interested, do go onto the website. You can see that on the screen here, frameproject.co.uk, and then, or otherwise you could email the research team at frameproject@kcl.ac.uk. Okay, so next slide, please. So, but there are other ways of getting help, and I think that certainly if you're feeling very anxious and very depressed for a while, then it would be really good to try and get some help by maybe talking to your cancer service. They do offer this support after you finish treatment for the cancer itself. They are there for you to go back to for the emotional support. So, for example, you could speak to your cancer nurse specialist. You could also try speaking to your GP, and they could similarly be able to kind of signpost you to different places that you could get help. And then obviously you're already involved with Keeping Abreast, but that sounds like a brilliant organisation where they've got lots of other women who are really wanting to help and support women going through a more challenging time at the moment. So I think, you know, using that resource would be really good, and working out what kind of help you're wanting. And then there are other organisations as well, such as Breast Cancer Support, Maggie's and Macmillan, which I suspect you're familiar with. If you really are finding, you know, life is really, really challenging and you're feeling very down and anxious, then you obviously can also access kind of psychological treatments. If you're in England, it would be through increasing access to psychological therapy services. And that you can self-refer into. You can put increasing access to psychological therapies into Google or your browser, and it will come up, and you can make a self-referral, or you can go via your GP. For those of you who are living in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, they do have services that are the same, the psychological services, but you do just access them only through the GP. You can't make a self-referral. But you could just ask to be put on their wait list. So those are different ideas in case things get more challenging or are more challenging for you at the moment. Next slide, please. So thank you so much for listening. And thanks to everyone who's taken part in the research that's really built where we are today. If you think, or you know someone who might be able to help with this FRAME project, www.frameproject.co.uk, to see the information sheet, find out about it, and then speak to one of the team, then please do so. And a really big thanks to all of those people who, with lived experience of breast cancer, who've helped us develop the research and develop the intervention. I really appreciate that. And then to the team of people who at King's who have helped with the research as well. I'd like to thank those, and the people who have helped fund my research to date, which has all contributed to the FRAME project in different ways. I'd like to thank those funders. And finally, I'd like to thank Keeping Abreast for having me to speak today, and I'm happy to have to take any questions